Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're standing on a windswept hillside in ancient Ireland. The sun has just dipped below the horizon and the first stars are appearing. Around you, your entire community has gathered. Children press close to their parents. Elders murmur prayers you don't quite understand. And then, someone lights the fire. The bonfire erupts into the darkening sky, sending sparks dancing like tiny spirits ascending to the heavens. The heat pushes back against the October cold. Faces glow orange in the firelight. This is not a celebration. Not exactly. This is survival. Tonight the dead will walk. The barriers between worlds will crumble. And everything you think you know about reality will become uncertain. Welcome to Samhain, the night that would eventually become your Halloween. I'm your name, and this is Holiday History. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to trace one of the most remarkable transformations in cultural history. How a solemn Celtic death festival evolved into a night of candy, costumes, and carved pumpkins. But here's what makes this story fascinating. Halloween hasn't forgotten its origins. Beneath every modern tradition, the ancient beliefs still pulse like a heartbeat. Before we journey back 2,500 years into Celtic Europe, I want to ask you something. Hit pause for just 5 seconds and drop a comment telling me, what's your favorite Halloween tradition? Trick-or-treating? Horror movies? Decorating your house? Or maybe you celebrate Samhain in its original form. I read every comment, and I'm genuinely curious about how this holiday lives in your life today, and if you're someone who loves understanding the why behind our holidays, why we do the strange things we do every year, then subscribe to Holiday History. We dig into these stories every week, and I promise you'll never look at your calendar the same way again. All right, let's go back to the beginning, back to the fire. To understand Samhain, you first need to understand how the Celts saw time itself. We think of years as 12 months, 4 seasons, 365 days, marching in orderly succession from January to December. The ancient Celts of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Brittany had a different system entirely. They divided the year into light and dark, summer and winter, growth and death. And between these two halves were 4 critical threshold moments, 4 festivals that marked the turning points. Imbolc in early February, when the first lambs were born. Beltane in May, celebrating fertility and the height of spring. Lugnasad in August, marking the first harvest. And then Samhain, pronounced Suwin or Sechwin, depending on the region. This festival fell on what we now call October 31st and November 1st. It marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, the dark half of the year. But Samhain was more than just a seasonal marker. The Celts believed that reality had layers. The world you could see and touch was just one dimension. Alongside it existed the other world, the realm of gods, spirits, ancestors, and fairy folk. Most of the year, these worlds remained separate, distinct, safe. But at Samhain, when the year itself was dying, the boundary between worlds grew thin as morning mist. This meant opportunity. You could communicate with your deceased loved ones, seek wisdom from ancestral spirits, or glimpse your future through divination. But it also meant danger. Not all spirits were friendly. The Eos, supernatural beings often translated as fairies, but far more dangerous than Tinkerbell, could cross into the human world. They might steal people away to their realm, curse your cattle, spoil your stored food. The dead themselves might return, not as gentle grandmotherly ghosts, but as confused, angry beings who didn't understand they died. So the Celtic people developed protections. Those hilltop bonfires I mentioned, they were called need fires, and they were considered sacred. Druids, the priestly class, would light them using specific rituals, sometimes by friction, creating new fire from the old world to light the new year. Families would extinguish their hearth fires at home, then relight them from the communal bonfire. This symbolically unified the community and brought sacred protection into each household. People would wear costumes, animal skins and heads, frightening masks to confuse the spirits. If a malevolent being couldn't tell you were human, it couldn't harm you. They left food offerings outside their doors, a practice called setting the table for the dead. Bread, milk, butter, ale. If spirits arrived hungry and found nothing, they might take their anger out on the household, and they practiced divination. Young women would peel apples in one long strip and throw the peel over their shoulders, hoping it would land in the shape of their future husband's initial. Nuts were thrown into fires. If they burned steadily, your lover was faithful. If they popped and jumped, betrayal was coming. Druids would read omens in the flames, the wind, the flight of birds, anything that might tell them what the coming winter would bring. Because remember, winter was genuinely life-threatening. If your harvest had failed, if you hadn't stored enough food, if your livestock couldn't survive the cold, people would die. Samhain was the night when you looked that mortality directly in the face. For centuries, Samhain remained a distinctly Celtic tradition, celebrated in relative isolation on the misty edges of Europe. Then Rome arrived. In 43 CE, the Roman Empire began its conquest of Britain. Over the next several decades, Roman culture, language, religion, and customs flooded into Celtic territories. Now, the Romans had a very different approach to cultural conquest than some other empires. They didn't always suppress local traditions. Instead, they absorbed them, blended them, created syncretic fusions that made their rule easier to accept. And the Romans had their own festivals of the dead. In late October, Romans observed Feralia, a day to honor the deceased. Families would visit graves, leave offerings of salt, bread soaked in wine, and violets. They believed that if you didn't properly honor the dead, their restless spirits would rise up and haunt you. Sound familiar? The Romans also celebrated a festival honoring Pomona, the goddess of fruit trees, orchards, and abundance. Her sacred symbol was the apple. As Roman and Celtic cultures merged, so did their traditions. The apple, already used in Celtic divination, took on new significance. The practice of bobbing for apples, which would later become a Halloween party game, likely originated as a fertility ritual, blending Pomona worship with Samhain divination. Girls would try to catch apples floating in water using only their mouths. The first to succeed would be the first to marry. The apple you caught might reveal something about your future spouse, sweet or sour, beautiful or blemished. What's remarkable is how seamlessly these cultures intertwined. Celtic Samhain didn't disappear under Roman rule. It adapted, absorbed, evolved. But the biggest transformation was yet to come. By the early Middle Ages, Christianity was spreading rapidly across Europe. Missionaries traveled from Rome and other Christian centres into the Celtic territories of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Cornwall. And they encountered a problem. The people loved Samhain. It was woven into the fabric of their lives, their agricultural calendar, their relationship with their ancestors. You couldn't simply ban it. So the church did something clever. They didn't ban it. They baptized it. In 609 CE, Pope Boniface IV established a feast to honor Christian martyrs. Initially celebrated in May, it was moved to November 1st by Pope Gregory III in the 8th century. By 1000 CE, the Church had added November 2nd as All Souls' Day, a day to pray for all the faithful departed, not just saints and martyrs. This created a 3-day observance, October 31st. All Hallows' Eve, the evening before All Hallows' Day, November 1st. All Hallows' Day, later called All Saints' Day, November 2nd. All Souls' Day, notice the timing? Directly overlapping with Samhain. The Church's message was clear. You want to honor the dead? Perfect, we do too. But we'll do it the Christian way, focusing on saints in heaven and souls in purgatory rather than wandering spirits and fairy folk. But here's the fascinating part. The people didn't abandon their old practices. They just rebranded them. Bonfires continued, but now they were said to represent the light of Christ, pushing back against the darkness of evil. Costumes evolved. Instead of animal skins to confuse spirits, people dressed as saints, angels, and demons, characters from Christian theology. The belief in wandering spirits persisted, but now they were souls in purgatory rather than Celtic ancestors. The Church had given the festival a Christian framework, but the ancient skeleton remained intact. One of the most important developments of this era was a practice called souling. On All Souls' Day, poor people, often children, would go door to door offering to pray for the deceased family members of wealthy households. In exchange, they'd receive soul cakes, small round pastries marked with a cross, often spiced with nutmeg, cinnamon, or allspice. The belief was beautiful and transactional. Each soul cake eaten represented a soul released from purgatory. Your charity could literally save souls. The soulers would sing, a soul cake, please good missus, a soul cake. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. Children carried hollowed-out turnips carved with grotesque faces and lit from within by candles. These lanterns were meant to represent souls trapped in purgatory, or depending on the region, to frighten away evil spirits. This practice, going door to door, receiving food, carrying carved vegetables, is the direct ancestor of trick-or-treating. But we're still centuries away from chocolate bars and Spider-Man costumes. Throughout the medieval period and into the early modern era, Halloween lived a double life. Officially, it was a somber Christian holy day, focused on prayer, church services, and remembrance of the dead. Unofficially, in villages, farms, and rural communities, it remained a night of magic, mischief, and mayhem. Despite church disapproval, divination practices flourished. In Scotland and Ireland particularly, Halloween was considered the most powerful night of the year for fortune-telling, especially concerning love and marriage. One tradition involved eating a salted herring before bed without drinking any water. Your future spouse would appear in your dreams offering you a drink. Another required walking backward to a well at midnight, then looking into the water by candlelight. Your future partner's face would appear in the reflection. Kale stalks were pulled from the garden blindfolded. The shape of the stalk, straight or crooked, tall or short, revealed what your future spouse would look like. These weren't just superstitions or games. People genuinely believed that on this night the veil was thin enough to glimpse the future. But Halloween also became known for chaos. Especially among young people, the night developed a reputation for pranks that ranged from harmless fun to genuine vandalism. Gates were unhinged and hidden. Carts were disassembled and reassembled on rooftops. Livestock were led into neighbors' fields. Outhouses were tipped over, sometimes with people inside. In some communities, this was called Mischief Night or Cabbage Night, after the vegetable, most commonly thrown at houses. The tolerance for this chaos was rooted in the ancient understanding of Samhain, as a time outside time, a liminal period when normal rules didn't fully apply. It was a brief period of permitted disorder before the strict discipline of winter set in. But as we'll see, when Halloween crossed the Atlantic, this mischief would become a serious problem. Halloween might have remained a primarily British Isles tradition, if not for one of the darkest chapters in Irish history, the Great Famine. Between 1845 and 1852, potato blight devastated Ireland's primary food source. Over 1 million people died. Another million emigrated, many to the United States. These Irish immigrants brought their culture, their stories, their traditions, and Halloween. When Irish and Scottish immigrants arrived in America, they found a nation that had no equivalent tradition. The Puritan-influenced regions of New England had actively suppressed such papist and pagan celebrations. But in the melting pot of 19th-century America, Halloween found fertile ground. The immigrants adapted their traditions to the New World, and one of the most visible changes was botanical. Remember those turnip lanterns I mentioned? Turnips in Ireland and Scotland could grow fairly large, but they were difficult to carve, and the results were often quite small. In America, immigrants discovered the pumpkin. Native to North America and growing to enormous sizes, pumpkins were softer, easier to carve, and provided a much larger canvas for creating frightening faces. The carved pumpkin rapidly became the iconic symbol of American Halloween. The jack-o'-lantern tradition was reinforced by folktales like Stingy Jack, stories of tricksters doomed to wander the earth with only a carved vegetable and ember for light. These tales, brought from Ireland, took on new life in American soil. By the late 1800s, Halloween was transforming from a folk tradition into a community celebration. Newspapers published party planning guides. Towns organized parades and festivals. The holiday was increasingly seen as an opportunity to build community bonds, particularly in rapidly growing cities filled with immigrants from different backgrounds. But there was still that mischief problem. By the 1920s and 1930s, Halloween pranks had escalated. Windows were soaked or sometimes broken. Property was damaged. In some cities, Halloween night saw genuine riots and destruction. Civic leaders faced a choice: ban Halloween or tame it. They chose to tame it. Communities began promoting organized Halloween activities, parties, costume parades, supervised gatherings to channel youthful energy away from vandalism. And they promoted trick-or-treating by offering children a sanctioned way to go door to door and receive treats. Communities gave them a stake in the holiday's peaceful celebration. Why destroy property when you could collect candy? By the 1950s, post-World War II prosperity and the baby boom cemented trick-or-treating as the dominant Halloween tradition. Suburbs were perfect for the practice. Safe streets, lots of houses close together, a sense of community trust. Candy companies recognized the commercial opportunity and began marketing specifically for Halloween. Prepackaged, individually wrapped candies became the standard. Halloween had completed its American transformation. By the mid-20th century, Halloween had become big business. Costume manufacturers offered off-the-rack costumes instead of homemade affairs. Halloween decorations, plastic skeletons, cardboard witches, synthetic spiderwebs filled stores every autumn. The candy industry went all in. By the 1970s, Halloween had surpassed Valentine's Day in candy sales. Today, Americans spend over $3 billion on Halloween candy annually. But the holiday also developed a darker commercial side. The connection between Halloween and horror entertainment became inseparable. Classic horror films, Frankenstein, Dracula, The Wolfman, were regularly screened around Halloween. Television stations hosted monster movie marathons. Then in 1978, John Carpenter released Halloween, a slasher film that forever linked the holiday with masked killers and cinematic terror. The horror movie industry now strategically releases films around Halloween, knowing audiences crave fear. Haunted houses evolved from amateur neighborhood efforts to professional, elaborate experiences. Haunted hayrides, ghost tours, extreme haunts where actors can touch you. Fear became a commodity. Something else interesting happened. Adults reclaimed Halloween. By the 1990s and 2000s, adult Halloween parties became major events. Costume contests with expensive, elaborate outfits. Nightclubs hosting Halloween events. Entire neighborhoods decorating their homes with animatronic displays costing thousands of dollars. Halloween has become America's second most commercially successful holiday after Christmas, generating over $10 billion in annual spending. From a sacred Celtic death festival to a massive commercial juggernaut in just 2,500 years. So here we are today. Halloween is everywhere. But here's my question. When you carve that pumpkin, what are you really doing? When you put on a costume and pretend to be someone or something else, what ancient impulse are you following? When children go door to door collecting offerings from neighbors, what ritual are they reenacting? The Celtic farmers who lit bonfires on hilltops 2,500 years ago would recognize something in our Halloween. Not everything, certainly. They'd be baffled by the candy corn and confused by sexy nun costumes. But they'd understand the core. They'd recognize the fascination with death and the dead, the playful confrontation with fear, the sense that on this night the rules are different, the acknowledgement that we live alongside mystery. There's one more thread worth mentioning, the revival of Samhain itself. Modern pagan movements, particularly Wicca and Celtic Reconstructionism, have reclaimed Samhain as a religious holiday. They celebrate it as the wheel of the year turns, honoring ancestors, reflecting on death and transformation, sometimes performing the same divination rituals their predecessors did millennia ago. So now we have both, the commercial Halloween and the spiritual Samhain, existing side by side. The harvest and the haunt. Halloween, at its heart, has always been about thresholds. The threshold between summer and winter, between harvest and hunger, between the living and the dead, between the known and the mysterious. And perhaps that's why it survives, why it thrives, why it keeps evolving. Because we all live on thresholds, between childhood and adulthood, between who we were and who we're becoming, between the comfortable and the frightening. One night a year, we acknowledge that. We dress as monsters and superheroes. We tell ghost stories. We light candles inside carved pumpkins. We remember that the world is stranger than we usually admit. From sacred Celtic bonfires to suburban doorsteps lit by LED spiderwebs, Halloween has traveled further than almost any holiday in human history. It's been a death festival, a harvest celebration, a religious observance, a night of mischief, a children's candy hunt, a horror movie marathon, and a multi-billion-dollar industry. But underneath everything, the plastic skeletons and fun-sized Snickers bars beats the same ancient heart, the recognition that on the edge of winter, in the dying days of October, the veil grows thin. And we are all standing on the threshold. If you enjoyed this journey through Halloween's hidden history, please like this video and subscribe to Holiday History. Share it with someone who loves October as much as you do. And down in the comments, tell me, where are you celebrating Halloween this year? What tradition, ancient or modern, means the most to you? Thank you for watching, and happy Halloween, or should I say, blessed Samhain. The fires are still burning.